Yeah, let's jump into the big issue. So today is Joe Biden's 81st birthday. What are you doing to celebrate?
I didn't know it was his birthday. Thank you. I
Well,
know.
he doesn't.
I'm
I don't know that he does either.
Right? I'm following
fairness,
Argentina. I'm like OpenAI, but I missed that it was the 81st birthday.
luckily,
Happy
he
birthday,
may have
Joe.
to.
God help us.
Yeah, well, so like you brought it up. So let's just kick off with both of those. Like, tell me how big of a deal this is in your mind, because I know you really understand, from the economic, geopolitical standpoint. How big is it that some people are calling him a libertarian, some people are just saying conservative, but that this guy, what does this mean, not just for Argentina, but for all of that region?
Look, I cannot understate how massive this is. I cannot understate how shocked and surprised I was. I've followed this region for years. My first job was at Goldman Sachs, and I was trading Latin American debt, specifically Argentine debt, Venezuelan, Mexican, and Brazil. So I've followed these economies forever. I'm very, sort of tuned in to what's going on. Argentina is an amazing place. They have a wealth of natural resources. They have a pretty sophisticated, educated population. So it's great people, very, very hardworking. And unfortunately, the Peronists, you think we were joking, don't cry for me, Argentina, the song,
Very good,
Evita. Look, Evita Perón and her husband, Juan Perón, they sort of kind of corrupted, for lack of a better term. I mean, it really is corruption, that economy way back when. And that's continued for decades. And so you've had this socialist bent to Argentina, which just hasn't worked and resulted in massive, massive inflation. Now, in the 1980s, the U.S. tried to help out. A friend of mine, Bill Rhodes, he wrote a book called Banker to the World. He was the banker to the world. He would literally go and restructure all these messed up economies. He came up with the Brady bonds in the 1980s for Argentina that helped to stabilize it. But of course, another team comes in, another administration, they think, oh, we don't have to pay Social Security. We'll take all that money from our Social Security. We'll line our pockets with it. And so these kinds of things, everything that they tried to put in place would go bust year after year after year because the politicians were corrupt. And so finally, this guy comes out of nowhere, Javier Milei, and he's not out of nowhere. I mean, he was kind of like a bombastic economist, right? Television guy, personality,
right,
who had a ton of energy, has a ton of energy, and is a little, wacky, right? With some of the things that he does, I get it, but it has a lot of commercial appeal. And he basically said, you know what? We're going to take a chainsaw. Literally, he did a stint with the chainsaw.
I've seen some videos with him. He has a chainsaw, literally in running around town.
So, Argentina, you thought that maybe the people would not respond. They're like, whoa, this guy's kind of crazy. No. They loved it. They loved it. And so he made it through the first round, went to the runoff, and still everybody thought the Peronist candidate, right, left over from the Evita days, would still make it. The Kirchners, right? There's a lot of sort of establishment players there in Argentina that had been with their families in office for decades. And this guy is the up and comer nobody, except that he's a television star, and just takes the world by storm. And so I actually think this is very fascinating, at least from a conservative movement, from a MAGA movement, because it shows you that with access to him, right? It's not like he was throttled and nobody could see him. He was out there front and center, really just calling everybody out. He was able to break through in a massive way. I mean, the guy won by a landslide. So I was talking to some of my trader friends just last night. I'm like, how's this going to play in the market? Oh, Wall Street's going to love this.
Really?
Now that's interesting. Wall Street's going to love this, they told me. And actually, I'm looking at the Argentine stock market today, which is actually in the green. They said Wall Street will love this because Argentina's economy has been such a mess. Inflation has been so out of control that they need some kind of counterbalance to that. Now, is he going to get rid of the central bank? I don't think so. But in other words, he's got sort of the dynamic makeup of somebody who recognizes what government bureaucracy has become. And this is a new chance, a new lease on life for Argentina. In other words, when you do something over and over and over again, it's not working, you do something different.
He's already saying that he's going to go in and it's going to be immediate, that we can't wait. Something like, we can't wait a day. We've got to start right now. I mean, this seems to me like he's going to institute radical change, which is great in some instances. But the question is, I remember, you know, and I don't know that it's completely analogous, but you think about what happened in the UK, where they tried to implement some stuff without having the people on board, and it kind of crashed and burned. I get his popularity, but the question is, does he need to now go out and sell these reforms and these institutional changes? Or because that's where sometimes I don't think that they fully appreciate the difference between candidacy and running for office and then governing.
Sure. And like, you look at Joe Biden right now, and he wants to be the FDR 2.0, right? He thinks he can put through all these programs. And it's like, wait a second, buddy, you don't have the Congress to do that. You don't have a big enough majority in the Senate to do that. So for him, he sold it to the people clearly, Sean. Like the people, this is like a landslide. But now you get all the bureaucrats that you got to kind of, bring into the system and in line. But it's almost like, hey, Trump won, but then he had to fight the internal battle of, what some people like to refer to as the deep state, right? And that's just sort of all the, the individual goals and choices of each politician and each bureaucrat. So yeah, Milei is up against that, but he's got the wind at his sails. He's got the people's backing. They were willing to elect the guy with the chainsaw in an overwhelming victory. So I would pay attention if I were a bureaucrat or politician in Argentina right now, because there's a new guy in charge.
And it's funny. I think I start looking around the world, and there is a theme. Everyone keeps saying, when Trump got elected, you have this real estate mogul, reality TV star, and it was like, oh, this is a one-off. And you start to see around the world, not just in one region, in Europe, in South America, these folks who are, have a TV background, maybe a marketing background, who are bringing a message of real fundamental change. And it's just interesting to me to see that's I think people are tired around the world of politicians who have great rehearsed talking points, but don't get things done.
And what's different about the past is that even if somebody from TV or whatever wanted to go into politics, and we saw it with Reagan, right? And he did it pretty successfully. But if they wanted to go into politics, the machine was not there to support them. And back then, there were only 3 networks.
Right.
And there were only so many newspapers, and you couldn't get your word out in the same kind of way. You'd have to mail letters. So you kind of needed an establishment to help you with the organizational efforts. And now you can send a tweet.
Right.
You can put up your own website. You can develop an email list. I mean, it's much easier, I think, to access the public. And so it's much easier for the public to see you. So whether it's, when you look at Vivek Ramaswamy right now, and some people have made comparisons to Milei and to Vivek, but Vivek didn't even have the television profile of a Javier Milei. Vivek kind of just came out of nowhere and started talking some common sense. And people are like, wow, okay, right. Well, I like what he's saying. That sort of makes sense. And you may not agree with him on everything, but you're like, I like the fact that somebody's talking about this in a new way and not just giving me status quo talking points. And the reason is because he's not bought and paid for, right? Like the people that are bought and paid for, they're part of the system. They do what they're told to do. They're very careful how they speak. And then you get these outliers who just tell it like it is. And people go, yeah, I like that guy or girl.